Hello and welcome. In the quiz today we are in position on the river and our opponent had checked to us. To bet or not to bet? That is the question. So let's figure it out. Pre-flop under the gun open and we elected to call. Two players call behind. The action went 4-way to the flop. Under the gun c-bet. Snowy would balance his range and raise 2/3 of the time here. In a vacuum, I prefer call. If we raise here, it's almost as a bluff, since player 6 raised under the gun and then c-bet into 4 players. When we raise him, we represent an overpair beaten or at least a very strong draw. The turn is heads up and is second barrel for half pot. And here the call is pretty standard. The ace is a much better card for the under the gun range. And finally, after our opponent checked into us on the river, we get to the position of the quiz. How to handle properly those kind of situations? Well, the key question we have to answer here is our hand ahead or behind our opponent range? If you don't know, I would advise a check. We want to have a polarized betting range. We are in position, so we can have a free showdown. That's one of the privileges to be in position. And if we don't know, that means that we are likely to be 50-50. It doesn't make a lot of sense to put a big bet to bluff when we have 45 or 55% of chance to win if we are checking. It doesn't make more sense to bet for value while we don't know if we have the best hand. By checking we can get to showdown, so we can see what opponent had in that spot. I would also advise you to take note and review that hand. And it's very important for the future, since hand reading is certainly the most important skill on the river. If the answer is no, we are behind our opponent range, so we might bluff, but I will save this situation for another quiz. If the answer is yes, then we might bet for value. In this spot, after our opponent checked the river, it's very likely that our two pairs are ahead over his range. So to evaluate it, we have a very good tool with Snowy. It's named the hand strength menu here on the left. It might be a bit confusing at a first glance, since it's a scale from 0 to 2. So 1 is 50-50. Here we have 1.31, which means we are plus 0.31 equity. But the menu is also evaluating the strength of our hand after we had bet, which is very important when we consider a bet for value. If our opponent will never call a bet with worst, there is no point to bet for value. So here, as you can see, against a full bet pot, Snowy gave us an equity of 105, meaning plus 0.05, and after a half bet pot, an equity of 1.29. In green, Snowy suggests to bet pot, while we have more equity if we bet half pot. Once again, we are betting our range and not our hand. And here we have a very polarized range with missed flush draw and a very strong hand like a straight or a set. So we want to bet pot. So now we know that our hand is ahead of our opponent range, that half bet pot is ahead of our opponent calling range, and then one bet pot is very slightly but ahead against our opponent range. Is that good enough for betting for value? Not yet. And indeed, if we click on the left on evaluation, then Snowy evaluates that betting pot is losing 3 big blinds in equity. Outcomes. Well, the point is that players are not all in there. betting would be so thin here for value that he would not overcome the risk of facing the check raise. Since player under the gun will never check raise for value any worst hand, and since he might also be bluffing with a busted flush draw. Betting half pot, as we saw already, it's incorrect for our range, but against an opponent who cannot read those things, it's probably plus EV. Snowy still will not do it more than 10%. I guess it's more a balance purpose. Snowy would probably not have enough bluff in his range if he starts to value bet all his two pair. So it's probably okay to bet half pot if you're able to fold on a raise. In the actual game, Hero was not able to fold to a raise and he lost to a straight. The last betting option offered by the quiz was all in. We saw already that two pair is behind in equity against Snowy calling range, so it cannot be a good move against Snowy. Moving all in can be right, but that requires a very special opponent and a very special dynamic. Villain has to think, okay, this guy doesn't do that for value, he has a flush draw, a missed flush draw, and he wants me to fold the top pair, so I'm gonna hero call him with pocket jacks or pocket kings. Without any history, I think most of the player would find a fold with ace king. So the good answer of the quiz was just to check and take the showdown. It might be surprising at the first glance because non-opponent will fold ace king, but our opponent has c-bet into 4 players, so unless it's ace king or ace queen of spade, it's very unlikely he has top pair. What is important to remember from today? Before betting, are we ahead against our opponent range? And for value betting, being ahead against this opponent range is not enough. We want to know how we are doing against the range, which give us action. This being said, that will be it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time.